So you think that the legal authority is actually very clear that, or when was the Anti-Deficiency Act passed, and has it ever been tested?
The Anti-Deficiency Act was passed in 1982, and yes, there's been litigation around the edges. For instance, the Anti-Deficiency Act is why you can't go work for free for the government, which I know feels like it's the opposite of what we're talking about, where Congress says you must spend money, but it's also that you can't accept free labor because Congress hasn't authorized you to spend that money, even if it's sort of an in-kind contribution, if you will. So but there's never been a question of like, I got rid of the Department of Education. And once again, I mean, this was true for the first Trump administration and arguably true for large chunks of the Biden administration too, as presidents have now said, look, Congress isn't solving these problems and the American people are getting antsy. I, the president, am going to fix everything myself. And Congress takes too long. It requires compromise. They're slow. They're partisan. They're deadlocked. I will just do it with executive action. It's really tested the boundaries of our constitutional order. So we've had lots of novel legal questions reaching the Supreme Court. And even as the Supreme Court has started to really crack down on this and say, no, it must run through Congress. At the same time, you've changed the incentives of who runs for Congress in the first place. And we've lost a lot of those members of Congress who sort of came in a Mr. Smith comes to Washington type mood, to legislate, to make policy. A lot of the members of Congress who are getting elected right now don't even hire legislative staff. They just hire more people to book them on cable news hits, post to social media, raise small dollars. And so Congress has become more stagnant, and the president, through administrations, different parties, have tried to fill in the gap, but that's just not how our Constitution works. And that's why it's not working, and why you see then this pendulum swinging back and forth every 4 years where, let's take the Obama Clean Power Plan that he did at the end of his administration. Well, then Donald Trump, of course, got rid of that Clean Power Plan. Joe Biden came into office. He didn't put back into place the Obama Clean Power Plan. He had a third Clean Power Plan. If you care about climate change, this ain't a way to run a railroad. You can't do it every 4 years. You've got to work through Congress. So all of these activists that cheer on the right or the left, that now they have 4 years to do what they want. Yes, but after the 4 years, everything you got done goes away. There's almost nothing from the first Trump administration that has now survived to the second Trump administration. So that's a long way of saying all of this, figure out how to work around Congress. The Supreme Court's done with it, and I'm done with it too.
Wow. Way to plant a flag. I agree with you that that at this point there's been this vacuum, and then the executive branch is filled, and it's not great. And I also agree with you that having 4 years is not enough time to really get things done sustainably, because a lot of the time, you're actually not even doing it for 4 years. Like, you're passing in year one, they get rolled down year two, and then it's out there for 18 months, and then it's like, oh, lose, then you turn around. So that's not great. Climate's a fine example. I'm sure people have others. So to the Department of Education example, which is very, very relevant, because I believe multiple figures have said they want to get rid of it. So let's play this out for a second. The budget has a certain number for the Department of Education, and then the executive branch says, haha, we actually have gotten rid of this agency, fired everybody, leased the office building, done whatever. It's all gone now. And then I can't think of a precedent where Congress was then able to enforce something about against the executive branch. In theory, this would get kicked to the Supreme Court, but again, my feeling is that the Supreme Court might look at this and say, hey, this is something for you guys to sort out, or we don't want to get in a fight with the president about this particular thing. How likely do you think this scenario that we just described is?
So, first of all, the Republican Party has had in their platform to get rid of the Department of Education since I got into politics, which hasn't happened yet. So whenever you're talking about anything in Washington, D.C., bet on the status quo. Because once people get into power and you've got that amount of money and you've got people who want those titles and that power, they tend not to want to give it up, even if they said they did ahead of time and even if they don't like the other party having that power. So that's part one. Part two, would the Supreme Court once again have this as a political question? These are two branches. They both have checks and balances against one another. They can work this out. Maybe yes, maybe no. I think it kind of depends how it arises. I think a lot of people don't understand that the Department of Education actually does not do a whole lot in our education system. It's really state and local. That's what your school board does, state set curriculum, all of those things. So there are certainly large swaths of the Department of Education that could probably disappear tomorrow, and the vast majority of Americans wouldn't necessarily feel that. But there's, of course, also parts of the Department of Education, mostly the grant part, where they give money.
Well, they do carrots. They'd be like, hey, guys, race to the top. Like, here's some money. You do this.
Yeah. And so if that money suddenly disappeared and all the parents in America were like, why did my school just lose 20% of its budget? That might be a politically unpopular thing to do. So yes, the two branches have checks on each other, but the American people have a check too, which is why presidential administrations tend not to do unpopular things. But of course, Donald Trump is a one-term president, so maybe he'll be bolder than before. But I don't know. George W. Bush was a two-term president, meaning he had a lame duck term also.
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting elements of this administration, because I agree with you, Sarah. Ordinarily, you get in there and you're like, hey, things aren't so bad. I'll install a person. We'll do a little movie. We have some resources to play with. And some people like something. I mean, there's always someone who's relying upon it. It's easier just to let the money to continue to flow. I have a different sense of this crew. I certainly, Elon and Vivek are private sector guys who are very, very anti-bloat, waste, bureaucracy. I mean, Elon hates bureaucracy with a passion. It's like one of the banes of his existence. And so they got Trump elected, at least in their minds, though in Elon's case, it's pretty accurate. And then he'll say, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get $1 trillion out of this. I said 2 trillion. Maybe I can't do that, but we're going to get $1 trillion out. And we're going to start running roughshod. And I do not think that Trump is someone who has that strong a point of view on some of this stuff. Like that there's, to me, this is going to be one of the most fascinating aspects of this administration is, you're right that historically you get in there and there are like, sacred cows everywhere. It's like, oh, let's not kill a cow, whatever, just like coast and cruise. But I think these are a bunch of cow slayers. They're going to.
So this gets to like this philosophical question about, limited government conservatives. Hearing that's like music to my ears if you think they're a bunch of cow slayers. But populist movements tend not to want to spend less. They tend not to want to give up power. And you look at the first Trump administration, they didn't cut spending. They ballooned spending. And that's not even counting COVID. I'm just talking about the first 3 years. And so this idea that like Donald Trump is going to do a total about face on how he ran his first term and then spend a lot less money and cut a lot of things in the second term. I mean, again, I guess.
I'm not saying that they're not going to find ways to spend the money. I mean, they're going to spend the money on tax cuts. And I think they're going to find some ways to spend money on populist things. Like, for example, return of the enhanced child tax credit, which, by the way, I'm totally for, personally. And I do think they're going to see this as hand in hand. They're going to be like, hey, like if we cut $1 trillion out of this budget, then we can have more goodies for ourselves, for others. And by the way, what you said just now, too, is like you could cut a lot of DOE employees and no one would ever notice that they're gone. One of the problems, like from my perspective, is that they're not really going to be differentiating very powerfully between people you're going to miss and people you're not going to miss. Like I think it's just going to be like, ooh, a cow. Like I hate cows, kill, and then be like, hey, here's some burger meat for that will in this metaphor, the burger meat was money. So
not the people. We're not doing Soylent Green. This gets to another interesting question about civil service reform. Again, something that Republicans have said they're for but never done. This idea that there are far too many people in the government whose jobs are protected no matter what. They're not fireable, even really for cause. Frankly, you have to go through this whole civil service protection board. There's appeals that you have to go through. But also that a lot of these people are in policymaking roles. And so I'll just speak to the Department of Justice, for instance. A new administration comes in and a lawyer says, oh, you know what? I don't actually agree with that policy, so I don't want to work on that case. You need to assign me to a different case. And that makes no sense, because what if all of the lawyers said they don't want to work on that case, but they're civil service protected and you can't hire more because you don't have any more budget for that, but you also can't get rid of the people who are there. So a real question for me is, A, to your point, what are they slashing and burning, if anything, once they get in there? Do you remember the West Wing episode where there's the she has 4 binders or something, and it's on cabbage, and I think Rob Lowe is like, that's ridiculous. We need to slash that department. And she's like, no, actually, this is really important about how cabbage is used in all parts of our ecology and blah, blah, blah. Who knows when you go in there to kill the cow and the cow looks at you with those big doe eyes and you learn that the cow was this beautiful creature all along. But a second part of this is civil service reform. And do they actually have the will in Congress to change how these people are hired, who has the ability to fire them, and what percentage of federal executive branch employees fall under that protected umbrella?
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you.